Okay, so this is October 17th, and this is our, I'm calling it Empathy Team 1 for now. So this is what, for this group. And what our plan is here is to do it, that we're meeting every 2 weeks or so. One of us will lead a lesson on empathy. In some way, we put it together ourselves. We have up to 1 hour of prep that we can assign, and then we're meeting for, I don't know how long everyone has, like ideally it'd be like 2 hours. I don't know how long everybody's time is today. What, Melissa?
I don't have 2 hours. My mom is visiting from America, so I had only planned to be with everybody for an hour.
Okay.
Maybe I misunderstood the intention.
That's okay. That's we hadn't really been clear on the time, so.
Okay.
Dorothea, maybe it would be good, ideally going forward, maybe about an hour works.
Yeah, 1 hour would be good for me too, mainly for physical issues.
Okay, so we have 1 hour then. And the topic that I'm leading today then is the one where I assigned the paper, the Carl Rogers paper, Empathic and Unappreciated Way of Being, and then also the instructions for doing empathic listening. And what we're going to do is actually kind of jump right in and discuss the paper, Empathic, but we're going to use empathic listening as the process for doing it. And if you print it out, or if you had a chance to print that out, but it's just pretty simple instructions for doing empathic listening. So in this process, I think everyone's done it, but I'll just reiterate it, is the first person will select who they're going to speak to, and then you can speak about whatever comes up on the topic. And then the person who's you're speaking to will reflect back their understanding of what the speaker has said. And then we'll keep doing that until the speaker feels fully heard, and then it will be the listener's turn to select someone to speak to, and then that person will reflect their understanding, and we'll just keep going for the rest of the hour. And so some tips, as a speaker, pause often. So if you speak, just say, keep going and going. It's really hard for the listener to, be able to reflect their understanding. Remember, as a speaker, you're trying to be heard the way that you want to be heard. So the person will reflect back their understanding of what you've said. And if they don't get it quite right, you can just, repeat it again, and you're kind of teaching the listener how to hear you to your satisfaction. When you're done talking, you can say something like, I feel fully heard, and that means you're complete, and it's time for the listener to then become the speaker and continue the speaking to someone else. As the active listener, you can reflect back kind of word for word, so-called parroting. That's fine. You can summarize, or you can paraphrase what the person has said, or you can kind of just share the essence of the meaning. So it's like no right and wrong way that the listener, the speaker will kind of guide you in how they want to be heard. And so don't worry about, getting it right. We don't want to kind of avoid stress there around that. And then while the speaker is speaking, as a listener, you don't want to give advice, which we were just talking about, where you were saying, Melissa, that when you were hearing Carl Rogers, do that empathic listening, it's like you wanted him to give some kind of advice. You're just like craving advice. And so we actually want to avoid giving advice. We want to avoid kind of asking questions. Lawyers love to ask questions, like in these groups. It's like the lawyers have the same thing. I can't ask a question. I'm going kind of crazy here. So, and we don't want to judge, we don't want to analyze, we don't want to diagnose or sympathize, which sympathize being, oh, I feel so sorry for you. It's just reflecting what it is that you're hearing. But when it becomes your turn, you can do any of those. So you're totally open that when it's your turn to speak, you can judge, you can analyze, you can ask questions, and the person you're speaking to will just reflect back. So you're totally open to do anything you want when you're the speaker. And then the other person who's not speaking or listening, the silent listener can just, you can take notes or just sit back and listen. So that's the essence of it. The best way is just to jump in. So the topic was about just our thoughts about reading the paper, An Unappreciated Way of Being, or you can also pose any questions or any comments about the whole listening process. So I think we're just ready just to jump right in. If someone would like to start, you could maybe speak to me and I can model it or something like that.
I don't mind starting.
Okay.
For me, when I read that, I mean, I find the listening aspect, not all of the relationships that people will have will be in a counseling or helping setting. And my concern is that, with whether it's a different kind of power issue, or whether it's a different kind of strategic relationship or interpersonal relationship in general, I think that what I struggle with when I see his videos and read his paper is how do I then apply that in a client paying customer relationship, or in a relationship of a teacher to their student, which is completely different than some kind of counseling relationship. And I also have concerns that the only aspect we're dealing with at this point is listening, and the behaviors that go along with paraphrasing and putting things back. But I think there's a lot more happening there, and I feel a little concerned that that's the only thing that's being talked about there when it comes to empathy. I think there's a lot more going on.
Okay, well, let me reflect. That was quite a bit. So what I'm hearing is you're seeing this in terms of it's like a client therapist. Okay. You're seeing this in a client therapist situation, with the therapist listening to the client or the patient, and you're wondering, like, how do you bring this into like a teaching environment, or sounds like a consulting client relationship. So how do you bring this into other types of relationships besides the therapeutic relationship? And also how, let's see what the last part was, there seems to be more to it than just one-way listening, that it's more of a relationship, like what is the listener doing that maybe the speaker doing that could contribute, or more of a relational aspect to it. Or I don't know if I'm getting that right.
That is a good encapsulation of what I was saying. And if I could go deeper into the second aspect, for example, the techniques of, putting yourself aside and 100% focus on the other, without judgment, without sympathy, without questions, the paraphrasing aspect, the aspect of not giving advice or a judgment, but really trying to get behind the walls, behind the person's what they're offering to you, and look a little bit more with what's behind the front door. The aspects of body language and facial expressions. I think it goes deeper than just about listening, and that's where I know from literature that I'm trying to find and trying to describe what's actually going on here. And yes, not all relationships are therapeutic. And I wonder if people like me, when I listen to that with Carl Rogers, didn't kind of want to take him and say, that's not what she's asking you. She's asking you to make a judgment with her and give her some advice. And it was the wrong setting for that. She was looking for a grandpa, you know, to tell her what to do. And that's the kind of, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing there is you're wanting something like a deeper understanding of what's going on here, like kind of what's under the surface of what's happening. So kind of like a deeper understanding, as well as you're really seeing that she had what she was really asking for. He wasn't giving her. She was wanting advice. She was wanting a grandpa, and he wasn't giving her what she was wanting. And you're kind of looking at the deeper dynamics, trying to understand the deeper dynamics.
That may have been part of the reason why she kept repeating herself so often, because she kept repeating a lot what her problem was and how she saw her problem and her struggle, which, if I extrapolate that to a business setting where you're going to a client to get a job or to get them to convince them to take you on as the person to solve their problem, and you want to be empathic and you want to listen and understand what's not only the problem, but what's behind it and what's, you know, the deeper meaning of their reaching to hire someone to solve this. That would be incredibly frustrating, I think, if you had to repeat yourself so often to get your point across. And that's where I think that, how do we take this from he had a very specific goal, was to let her work through her own issues to come to her own understanding without telling her what to do. And that was a very therapeutic choice. But in a business situation, I believe you can still be empathic, but come with solutions and come with things. So where does that fit in?
Okay. So what you're saying is that you were noticing that Carl Rogers was kind of reflecting what she was saying and letting her come to her own kind of conclusions. And you're kind of comparing that if you're in a different situation where a client is coming to you and wanting to tap into your advice and your knowledge, that, you know, that you would be wanting, it would be frustrating for them just to keep repeating what they're saying and just hearing that back, that they would be asking for advice. So you're kind of like saying, comparing the two, like, how do those kind of relate to each other? Or
yeah,
or maybe
how do you, is there an aspect like, okay, first we're going to dig into you. First, we're going to go through this empathy circle, empathic experience, whatever, you know, this discovery process is. And then we're going to stop that. And then I'm going to go on. Is that what happens differently in a organization to client relationship or a client supplier relationship? Is that what makes it different? That at one point that part stops and it's no longer about listening and hearing and understanding, but then about the actionable application of that information.
Mm-hmm.
And is there does there need to be a defined moment where that happens, or is there just a different way that you would respond? So you were kind of checking and empathizing, but still as well at the same time adding in your own opportunity at the same process, you know? So I don't know where that, you know, how that could happen.
So it's like you're wondering, how do you move from that empathic listening to action? So how does that transition happen?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's just like a question. Yeah. You're kind of sitting with that question.
I am wondering about that. That is a big kind of a concern of mine when it comes to the application of something like empathy circles like this to that process, because at one point I think in a client supplier relationship, they're going to want to listen too. And they're going to want to hear what you have to say. And they're going to want your judgment. And they're going to want your wisdom. So I just wonder if you were developing empathy circles for organizational or business practice, would you develop it differently?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you're thinking in terms of like empathy circles in a business environment, would they be developed differently because people are wanting to tap into that actionable knowledge that you have?
Yeah.
And how do you do that? How do you transition from just that listening to that action component?
Right. So right this minute, Edwin, I'm hoping that you'll tell me that answer.
Uh-huh.
Because now we've been talking about it for 14 minutes and I'm now looking for an answer.
Uh-huh.
So we could continue to probe me,
Uh-huh.
or I could say, okay, now Edwin, your turn. And that's where I think in the time-sensitive, time-pressured environments that, I'd be working to help my students become better in using empathy skill. This is a big component of that, and that's
So it's a big, in the environment that you're working in with your students, the students are going to be wanting to do actionable work, and you're just, it's a big part of what you'd be doing, and you're just wondering how that would happen, and then you're kind of looking for the answer, and looking for some kind of an answer to that.
That's
or
right.
Wondering.
So I think you understand where I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
I think you understand the questions that I have, and I would now like to turn it over to you.
Okay.
So I can get some answers.
You say you're fully, all you say is you're fully heard, and then the turn passes on. And so you're really looking for some answers.
I've been fully heard, and now I want your advice.
And you're ready
Come
for
on,
some
Carl,
advice.
tell me what to do.
Okay, then I'll speak to Dorothy.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, this is very, very interesting. So I see what Carl Rogers is doing is kind of like this foundational first step, and it's more of a client-therapist relationship, kind of a one-way listening. And I see what we're doing here in Empathy Circle is sort of a second step to that. We're bringing it into this relational empathy. So it's kind of like a next step.
Okay, so you're seeing Carl Rogers' work, Edwin, as being foundational, as kind of showing us how empathy works in a one-way therapist interaction. But you're also saying what we're doing here as an empathy circle, you see as extending that a bit into a relational format.
Yeah. So at this point, it opens up the advice giving part. Like I can now throw advice out, I can do whatever, but you just reflect back what it is that I'm saying in terms of, how do we move from that, empathic listening to advice, that now we kind of have a container for doing that. I as a speaker can give advice, I can judge, I can do anything, I can analyze, and you will reflect that back.
Okay, so you're feeling as a speaker, you can expand on sort of the container that was set by reflection and empathy in the Rogers model. And you as the speaker can give advice or do more than the mere empathic listening, if you want to call it mere. Okay, so you're seeing this as a step beyond what Rogers was talking about.
We're bringing it into more of a relational container here. It's not just, you've got a problem, you're coming to me and I'm listening. It's now we're kind of adding another layer that we're in this relationship here.
Okay, so you feel another layer of the relationship, that it's not just a one-way model, it becomes a relational interaction.
Okay. And so the other part of this is also practice. this is also a really good container where we can practice that first component of just the listening, like deep listening. Like we're trying to get away from all the other things that inhibit the deep listening, so we can just keep practicing this listening. And this very practice I find just really invaluable.
Okay, so what you find really valuable here is that we have an opportunity to practice the deep listening and leave the other forms of interaction outside and just practice.
And practice. Okay. And it also, I found, really develops resilience. So by doing this, there's a certain resilience that I found that when I go into a conflict situation, these empathy circles have given me a certain spaciousness and a resilience that when I go into those environments, I have much more space to be present and to listen to, especially in conflict situations.
Okay, so what you see valuable about the practice of the empathic listening is that when you encounter a conflict situation in your day-to-day life, you've built resilience, you've built skills, you've built the capacity to, I guess I would almost say you're saying stay centered and be present.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that was very good. It is, I feel much more centered. I feel grounded. I don't have as deep of a need to be heard. Like, it's like, I've already been heard. I've already been deeply heard. So I'm sort of satiated in my need to be heard. So when I go, it's like I don't have that neediness of having to be heard too and having to compete to be heard. So that little bit helps a lot too, to maintain that groundedness.
Yeah, so you're not bringing your own neediness into the conflict. Your need to be heard has already been met.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's one part. The other part is Carl Rogers references Gene Genlin. I think that's another part, is the feeling part of the empathy. But I think that's really like a core piece, is that we're talking about felt experience, like getting more attuned and more aware of what our bodily felt experience is of ourself, of the other, as well as our group here. What is the felt bodily experience of us together in a relationship?
Okay, so the connection that Carl Rogers drew with the work of Gene Genlin really pulls in the feelings aspect for you, and you feel that's really an important piece, this understanding empathy as feeling into the experience of someone else.
And there's two parts to it, that the work was expanded by Gene Genlin, where he's saying the people who had the most growth in this therapeutic environment were the people that spoke about their felt bodily experience. And he went on to develop a whole school of work called focusing, which is about the person who's being listened to, how they can tap into their bodily felt experience. So that becomes part of the relationship. It's not only the listener, but it's also the speaker, how well they can speak from their felt bodily experience. So there's a whole bunch of skills like to tap into that.
Okay, so it's not just felt experience that matters here. You've used the word bodily a few times. So it's this felt bodily experience, you as an embodied being. What are you feeling as the speaker? And connecting to that is also a part of the empathic listening.
Mm-hmm. So if I feel into my body, I feel sort of a dark spaciousness, in my body, like, and then I also feel like a bit of a struggle to express these ideas. I feel a little pushing within what I'm saying.
Okay, so you have this combination of a dark spaciousness, which sounded, even with your body language, like that was a pleasant feeling, but also a tense, pushing feeling that didn't sound quite so pleasant. You were struggling with that one.
Yeah, I noticed that pushing, and so I'm just aware of these bodily experiences, and with the focusing, you sit with one of those experiences and you just go into the experience and go into the experience. And it kind of, things kind of reveal themselves, and there's a lot of growth that happens in that. So.
Okay, so focusing really stays with that felt bodily experience, and that's where you're expressing, and you mentioned Jen Lin said it earlier, that's where growth happens.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking of the action component, like how do we move to action? You know, Carl Rogers is saying action happens because you have a new insight. The client, I mean, the person being listened to has a new insight. And I remember I'm feeling now like, oh, I'm starting to talk too much. So I'm feeling that maybe I should stop talking because I want to create more space. But I'll just say that the one part of the action is that the person who's being listened to kind of discovers some new aspect, and then it kind of changes their personality, and that's like new action kind of flows from that.
Okay, so you went back to that action question that came up in the dialogue between you and Melissa, and you're trying to figure where that comes from, and you drew again on Rogers and said that action comes from insight. So as the speaker gets new insights, action will flow from that.
Yeah.
And you also expressed that you were concerned that you were talking a little too much.
Exactly, so I'm going to say I'm fully heard. That's my guilt for speaking too much.
Okay. Well, I guess then it is my turn to speak. Okay, and then Melissa, if you don't mind, I'll speak to you.
Okay, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks. I have a combination of things I want to speak about now. Partly they come from the lecture that Rogers gave on the tape, and then he had, his written notes behind it, but partly it comes from the conversation that's been building here. I want to make sure I say those things too. First, just speaking about what I read from Carl Rogers, the two things that most intrigued me when I was listening to him speak was two areas where he said he had experienced a change. And one was that he no longer calls empathy a state, but a process. That got my attention because I believe empathy is a verb, not a noun. I know there's a verb for it, but but that's what I think of it. I think is empathy is something we do, not a thing we have. So that was my first one, and the other one was.
You might want to get some pause for.
Yeah, let me pause there. Yeah.
So two things really seems to be what you're saying is that two things really struck you in that video, and the first kind of epiphany that he shared was that empathy isn't a state but a process, and you really, it seems like you really agree with that statement that being a process, being something you do, not something that we have, that it's an active aspect, demonstrable something. That's the first thing.
Right.
That I hear you say.
Exactly. And then
yes.
the other was he seemed to focus on feelings, just like what Edwin was talking about. But I heard him pull in the word meaning. And it was interesting. Like, I got this sense that for Carl Rogers, meaning is in the feelings. But I'm also not sure I agree. I think feeling is a piece of meaning, but it's not all of meaning. That there are other pieces. So those were the two things that got me, the state process thing and the feelings meaning thing.
So when you heard him then talk about this focus on feelings, and he used the word meaning when he was referring to this, process of understanding and synthesizing the feelings of another, You know, on one hand, that was something that pricked you because you don't feel that feelings are the only thing that's represented in meaning, that meaning is a lot more than just feelings. So you're not really sure if you agreed with his assessment there.
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
You do have that right. And it's interesting because you and I share a discipline, and, you know, the communication discipline is about meaning and meaning making. And so, you know, I keyed in on that word when he used it. But he comes from a different discipline, and the discipline of a therapist, like you mentioned early on. He's looking for meaning in different ways for different purposes than maybe people who are in the communication field might.
Yeah, so we are in the same profession, the communications profession, which is different than that of Mr. Rogers. And because that, he looks at the word meaning and in a very different, from a different angle than we might, or in a different way, or actually might even define it differently.
Yes, yes. And that raised his profession raised another issue for me. And I have to admit, I feel this when I'm in situations where I'm being reflected. And it's that there's a power component in reflection. The person who is doing the reflection has control of the conversation. As I feel it unfold, I feel like I'm actually almost mimicking Edwin's body language right now. I feel the struggle. I feel like, wait, I want to say more than that, or I am saying more than that, or I'd like more from you than that. But I feel like when all that is happening between us is reflection, it's not true communication, and the communication to me is controlled by the person who's doing the reflection. So I feel the power dynamic in it.
In this power component that you feel is quite different in this profession than in that of Mr. Rogers, you know, one person reflecting all the time basically has control of the concept and control of the, I'm looking for a different word. I'm having a difficult time finding it.
Interaction?
Yeah. No, in control of the not even direction of the dialogue, but in the memory of, or in the frame. You know, they're framing
Yes.
it. They're framing this problem or issue or discussion through their own reflection. You feel a struggle in that because we're always really in our professional sense of the word, where dialogue and the back and forth is a very critical component of communication, that it's not only a reflected one person something, but there's the relational aspect of the dialogue as well. You
hit the word I wrote in my notes while everybody was talking, which is dialogue. We were talking about empathy to action, and I kept thinking, okay, empathy to what kind of action? How does empathy move to decision making? How does empathy become dialogue? And I think that's what I miss in some of this, is an actual sense of dialogue. And then that has me struggling against the frame, as you said, that a frame is created, because reflection is unidirectional. It's not dialogic. And I'm trying to think, why not? It's two people talking. Why is it not dialogic? But it doesn't feel dialogic to me.
So in this this dialogue aspect, that, you know, a dialogue is about these two, and it doesn't really seem to move to a dialogue, but it stays in the one reflective frame. And And that's something you have a difficult time kind of making sense of, this struggle against this frame. And if this is so different in this setting than in the other setting.
That's it. And yeah, I feel heard. It's like there are things I understand and things I don't quite understand and I struggle against, and you've captured them well.
Yes. It's okay to be happy with yourself. Yeah, so that you are good. Yeah. Empathy superstar. Sorry.
Who are you speaking to?
I'm reflecting to myself, Edwin.
Oh.
Did you hear that? Did I say that out loud? Wait.
Empathy superstar.
Uh-oh. So can I pause our process for a moment?
No.
No.
We want to keep it within the frame, and then whatever you want, whatever's coming up, you can just select who you want to speak to, and then I can just, if you're speaking to me, I would say, oh, I hear you want to pause it, but we would keep within.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here at this point, I'm speaking to you, Edwin. I am itching in myself to ask questions, to get an answer from someone about what they think and what they feel about this. And what I am less interested in is telling you what I think and feel about it, but I really want to know what other people think and feel about these things. So
Okay.
I will tell you my questions.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
But
so
I know
you're really
you're just going to tell me that you understand my questions.
Yeah, you're really itching to know what other people are thinking and feeling about this process, and you're like itching to ask questions.
I'm going to ask a couple now.
Okay. Mm-hmm. You're going to ask some.
What happens if a client is not interested in the circle format and they just want an exchange? They just want a dialogue. I mean, I think you can still be empathic and still dig behind this wall of yeah. I think of it as a wall. It's so funny because I think people allow you to, the wall starts dissolving a little bit, and then their moreness comes through. But, what if people just want an exchange, or what if they aren't interested in that? And that actually keeps the wall more like this instead of opening it up. And I also will make sure that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So you have a question is, what if a client doesn't want this take part in an empathy circle, and you have this sense of people are behind the wall, and you would like the wall to kind of open up.
But I mean, and that it does this kind of super reflective tool, when you're just reflecting back what someone is saying, a la what we saw in the video of Carl Rogers, if that wouldn't actually, which is what I think happened to Gloria, kind of hinder her, or actually make her a little bit disgruntled about what was happening, in not all situations would that be, you'd be shown the door.
Uh-huh. So if you did what Carl Rogers, if you did like empathic listening, like Rogers did with a client, they would, kick you out the door.
Yeah, I think that we should be looking for some kind of balance to be able to teach somebody some kind of balance, or when is the paraphrasing and reflective approach to a question or to a statement or to an aspect of the conversation appropriate, and when do you need to pause that and move to something else, and then can you go back to the other thing? So it's not really a traditional circle in the way that we've done it here, and certainly it would be not a circle if it was only two people. But is there a way to teach how to balance, or is there a way to, I don't know, do this for a small time and then move on to a more dialogue aspect, and then more for a small time, and then back to a dialogue? Or is that possible?
So you're just looking at how do you move from this reflection in a relationship to another way of into more of a dialogue?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you make that transition? When do you use
Mm-hmm.
this? When do you use dialogue? How do you move between the two?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's my biggest issue. I think that's my big issue, because I think that in a pure form, in a pure form, in a particular setting, the way the empathy circle approaches this aspect of discovery and understanding is very appropriate. But I wonder if it's appropriate in all professional settings.
Mm-hmm. So it's just like you're feeling a curiosity about if maybe empathic listening or empathy circle is appropriate in certain situations, but is it in all others too?
Yeah.
Or just kind of sitting with that curiosity.
Yeah, that's my biggest, how could you, or would you at all, or could you modify the approach based on a different professional setting?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like tune this tool differently based on a different setting. I don't know if it's that or something else.
So you're just wondering, could this tool be used in different settings? Could you maybe tweak it for the communications field, or how could it be changed to maybe you're wanting more effectiveness? Or
I think the conversation, and I mean, Dorothy was also talking about power and about the dialogue aspect as well. I think that different settings, people have different needs. I mean, if you are in a counseling setting, you're looking for an answer to something that's very personal for yourself, or you're looking to be convinced, or you need to make a change that you don't want to change, or something happens and you're, in a position of, it's all very much about you and some kind of modification of your own behavior kind of relationship. And in a setting where, people are developing tools to communicate something to a stakeholder group, your organization is driving that. It's not about you. It's about organizational goals and needs. And you need to, assess the situation. And it's all basically defined by a need elsewhere, but you still you really want to understand. So it's a different kind of setting.
Mm-hmm. So how do you apply empathy to different settings?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with different power structures too. I mean, if I come to you for advice, I'm not subservient, but I am putting you in a role of wisdom to my role of lack of wisdom. And that's different. If I go to see a doctor, they're the expert and I am not, and I'm coming to them differently. But in another way, it's my experience and I'm telling it to you. So I'm the expert of myself. So yeah, I'm just struggling with how this would be applied in the same way.
How do you apply empathy to giving advice in different situations? I mean, giving yourself advice or a doctor giving advice. So what's the relationship of giving advice and empathy?
How could I teach a finance person to be empathic with their clients? I mean, when it's the finance person themselves that is the one with the information and it's a kind of a reversed role, the reversed power role. But yeah, it's a different setting.
Mm-hmm. How would you apply empathy for a person in finance that's giving financial advice, for example, or a doctor giving advice to the patient, or any kind of profession that kind of sells advice in a sense, that offers advice? What's the relationship?
You understand. Yeah, I think you understand that my big question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you feel fully heard?
I do.
Okay, well, I'll speak
More
back.
questions.
Yeah, but you even have more questions, so you have a
Oh
lot
my
of
God, I have
questions.
so many more questions.
So you're just like flooded, overwhelmed,
Oh.
full
I
of
said I wasn't going
questions.
to take notes, and I took notes. Ah.
You're in pain with all the questions. Are you feeling pain with all the questions? Overwhelmed?
Such a loser.
You're feeling like a loser with all the questions.
Empathy circle loser. I
Feeling
went
like
from a joyous triumph to a loser.
Oh, you feel like you've gone from a joyous triumph to being an empathy circle loser.
Yes, Edwin, you understand me fully.
Okay, then great. So I'll good. So I'm really glad I'm hearing you. Let's see. So I'll speak back to you. I would say part of the empathy circle is just to practice this aspect of empathic listening. So it's not the cure-all, end-all, but we're practicing the ability to listen more deeply. So that's part of the process is just the practice part of it.
Okay, so the empathy circle, the goal here is really to practice the ability to listen empathic.
Yeah, and also that this is sort of a container where we can kind of develop other processes too. Is how I see it. Like, what else can we add to this container to deepen the empathy and develop other tools and for
Okay, so this
people.
as kind of a shell or as a structural, form that still needs to be filled in with more things to make it more whole.
Yeah, and I just see it as like a first step. Like, of all the things I've come across in 8 or 9 years or 10 years of really digging into empathy, this is a first step I've just seen is immensely beneficial. I mean, this is the first step. I've just had so much positive, benefit from just this practice.
You've seen over the 8 years or so that you've been working with lots of different methods. This one has been the one that you've found most beneficial to helping people understand, what being more empathic means.
As a first step, this is the first step. Yeah. As the first step, we can just keep building on top of it, and we can move all the way into human-centered design. This is like a gateway into human-centered design,
right?
Which is all about action, about
Right.
So, but this basic skill, and then it's also a container where we can experiment and find other tools. Like, how do we? Like, I kind of hear Dorothy wanting kind of more, energetic dialogue. Like, there's more of a felt dialogic quality, and I get that sense, and I like that too. And there's things that we can add to this, like role playing can be really good for that. You start getting into role playing and acting, and it becomes much more, kind of energetic too.
Sorry, were you saying that to Dorothy, or am I responding
to you?
Still?
Yeah, I'm just saying it to you.
So you were also saying that this is kind of like the basic module to build upon, and there's more tools in the toolbox that would be coming. For situation or other things, but this is just the first step.
Yeah, exactly. And you're breaking up a little bit, but I got the essence of it. So it's also kind of a practice of giving up immediate questions, immediate analysis, immediate advice. So we're kind of practicing this presence, this deep listening. So I see this, you become very aware of these other things that are kind of blocking empathy. And one thing within this freestyle dialogue, there's all kinds of rules in that already. It can be very competitive. People ignore each other. There's all kinds of power relationships in regular dialogue. So just regular dialogue is no panacea. I mean, look at Trump and, Hillary Clinton, right? So it's like, so we're just practicing this deep listening, which is I just see it as immensely beneficial practice.
This as a basis does more than just give you a skill to listen, but it also takes away some of the barriers the barriers to empathy that are there, like giving an immediate response, and the competitiveness and ignoring what things are the power issues, that being able to use this tool to kind of remind you of the way listening should happen, that it should be really about listening to the other and putting yourself aside.
It's great in relationships, like with my partner Joan. We do this for an hour a day because she's into like feeling her ideas are right. I'll say something, she'll jump in, right away. And now when we do empathic listening, I know I'm going to be fully heard. I have space to be fully heard, and it gives me just, I find it really beneficial in terms of the relationship, and in the facilitation I do with other, couples that have, relationship problems. Just this simple practice of empathic listening is immensely beneficial.
Yeah. So even in, personal relationships, just using this tool it gives you the space really to be able to express and know that the other person will take the time to listen so you can feel heard. And although you broke a little bit, I think that you were saying try this in other relational situations where people need to be able to have the ability to bring things out without immediately being cut off, and that people feel the space to be able to be heard.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel fully heard with all that.
Can I jump in?
Right.
If it's Melissa's turn, so if she wants to speak to you.
Oh, sorry, I lost track of this turn thing.
Good.
Well, I wanted to jump in because I see the time, and I know we wanted to allot an hour, especially for Melissa's mom visiting. But this actually leads to the piece I hope to do in 2 weeks, which I haven't fully formulated yet. But it strikes me that this form of empathic listening has an underlying assumption about where meaning resides. And it seems to suggest that meaning is inside me, and all I have to do is speak and have it reflected, and meaning will come out. I'm going to suggest that there's another way to look at meaning. And meaning is what we construct in the between. And that is not inside me or inside anyone else. It's what we do together. And that's what I think of as relational empathy, relational meaning. So it's not that meaning is in me and merely needs to come out. It's that I need to have dialogue with someone in order to construct and craft the meaning that may not be fully formed inside me. I may not have had the thought until we talked. So that's where I'm going to go next time.
Okay, yay! Yeah, so what I'm hearing there is that the meaning this is kind of like an individualistic meaning gets created here, and you're looking at kind of the relational meaning that gets created between us, and that's what the next lesson is going to be about.
I hope.
Yeah, and I'm like excited about it. So we can prompt the form. So just as a transition, yeah. So yeah, and we're doing it. We didn't meet last week, so we met this week. So we'll meet next week again. Is that correct?
Next week is what, the 20?
Say that again.
We're supposed to meet every 2 weeks. We didn't meet last week because I can't remember why. I think I had something going or whatever. And then, so we met this week instead. So if we were on our 2-week trajectory, we would have met last week and we would have met next week. So we kind of pushed last week's to this week. So we meet next week to.
We meet next week, the 24th.
Yeah, and you'll be leading that.
Okay. Okay. And I'll try to get something out to everybody by the weekend about what to read. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a Benjamin Broom article.
Oh, great.
Okay.
And we'll see where that goes. And it'll be interesting to have like the point counterpoint and see them together.
Yeah, I'm excited. I really get where you're going with it, and I'm excited about that. So,
Thanks. I don't have the ideas fully formed yet, but that'll happen when we talk.
Yeah, this is the container for that. So, okay, well, great.
And just on an aside too, Edwin, I have to say, the first time that I did an empathy circle during that design class through when I first met you, I hated it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was horrible. I thought, oh my gosh, I can't ask a question. I can't do my thing. I can't just be me. What is this? This is just so limiting. And I kind of changed my mind tonight. And it could be that it's because we're talking about a subject that I know we're all interested in and we're all digging into, and it's, a very compact thing. And it's also just with 3 people. And it doesn't fly all over the place with, who am I? What do I want in life? Blah, blah, all of this. It's very, very focused.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm becoming warmer.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I learned a lot too. I do hear you're getting warmer, and this is the kind of thing we want to explore. Yeah, and I'm kind of excited about the focus. So what we did. I'm very excited about this, and I'm going to do more. I want to do more of these, like specifically like on this paper, because this is a really core paper, I think, to the whole empathy work as a foundational jumping off point, and I just found it very rich too.
Yeah, I do too. I'm still hoping to look at what this all means. What is the model here? What is the conceptual model here that we're talking about when we're talking about empathy? And we're talking about different processes. We're talking about the sending process. We're talking about the receiving process. We're talking about the relation on in biology. We're talking about so many different things when we just talk about this one tool. And so that's very exciting.
Okay, well, I don't want to keep you over. I know we had said so. I guess we'll stop the broadcast.